Hey everybody, today we're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars and Cincinatti Bengals Thursday night football game, and we're going to talk about the battle between the two number one draft picks in the last two seasons, Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, and we're going to talk about why Joe Burrow is going to reign victorious today. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Feud podcast. Paul couldn't be here with us today, but we still got our lovely man Mason Reed over here. And like I said in the intro, we're going to be talking about Jacksonville Jaguars and Cincinnati Bengals. But before we get into those things, I just want to say, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, drop a like, comment, subscribe, comment down below. Who do you think you need to start this week? We're here to help. We'll give you any advice. We'll respond to every comment that we get. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Go ahead and follow those if you guys enjoy the content. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and check out some of our other videos, like our little 1-minute tidbits, just on quick fantasy advice or things that happen throughout the week. Mason, how's it going today, man?
It's great. It's a lovely morning. I'm chilling here before I'm about to go to work. We're getting some work in. We're going to tell you who to start tonight.
Yes, sir. And I guess we can just start with our biggest stars of the night, and I'll just let you start with that one, Mason.
All right, man. Pretty simple for me. I'm going to go Joe Mixon. He's getting a consistent workload. The Jaguars' rushing defense allows 115.7 yards a game. So I think he's going to hit that and probably go beyond.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. He is also my biggest star of the night, just for the reasons you said. Jacksonville's defense is in complete shambles this season, and I think Joe Mixon is just going to feast. He's been great all season long so far. I believe he is number 3 in the NFL for total rushing yards. I don't know if that's completely true. I believe it's the top 4 at least, though. I think he's just going to feast all night long. He's going to be involved in the pass game. This is going to be his couple of touchdown game. If you are doing DFS or anything like that tonight, I say Joe Mixon's your MVP, and I think it's a pretty easy one. I think there's a few other guys that could steal the spotlight, like Joey B, obviously, but I think Joe Mixon's going to have one of those games where he shows why he was an RB1 for your team. So, like normal, we're just going to jump straight into our over-under segment that we do, and I guess we can just start things off with Carlos Hyde, the backup running back in Jacksonville. He's over under 18.5 rushing yards. What do you think about that one?
Urban Meyer is, I don't know, he doesn't know what he's doing, I feel like. So while he should give a majority of the touches to James Robinson, he could give these touches to Carlos Hyde. Like Stone said, over under 18.5 rushing yards. Carlos Hyde has gotten 44 yards in week 1 against Houston. He had 7 yards in week 2 against Denver. And he had 44 yards again in week 3 against Arizona. I honestly think this Cincy this whole Cincy defense is pretty stout. I think Carlos Hyde is not as involved. I hope he's not involved at least. So I think he's under 18.5 yards tonight.
Yeah, and I'm going to completely agree with that. I think Cincinnati's defense, like you said, it's been too good as of now, and I think that if anybody's going to get any of it, it's going to be James Robinson tonight. They're going to have to lean on him if they want to have any sort of chance to win this game. Cincinnati's pretty underrated right now, and I think they're going to be a good team, especially defensively. That front line that they have there is nothing to mess around with. They've been nasty through the first 3 games. And
Sam Hubbard, baby, let's go.
Trey Hendrickson also. Trey Hendrickson's opening up a lot of room for Sam Hubbard to work. So, but I've always liked Hubbard. Hubbard's always been good. But yeah, Cincinnati, they looking to be the real deal. They haven't really played against great offenses yet. Minnesota's offense is good, and they held them to around 20 points. So, I mean, that was pretty good. Chicago's offense is dog water, and then
they had a Ruby.
And then who else did they play last week? Pittsburgh. That I've been saying their offense is horrible since day one. So, I mean,
it's still Pittsburgh though. Pittsburgh's tough. They'll play teams tough.
Yeah.
I mean, who'd Pittsburgh beat week 1? The Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and they shouldn't have, to be fair.
Yeah, they shouldn't have, but they'll still play teams tough. So I don't think it's anything to scoff at.
So that brings us to the James Robinson over under 52.5 yards, since we talked about Hyde and how he's not going to get it done. I was talking about how they need to lean on James Robinson. I am going to say over. I think 52.5 yards is going to be pretty easy for him to get over if they give him the touches to do so. It's really dependent on Urban Meyer, like we've been saying since week 0. We've been saying Urban Meyer's got to call the plays right if they're going to have a chance to win, and their chance to win is getting James Robinson probably over 80, 90 rushing yards today.
It is. It's his workload is increasing each week. Week 1, he had 5 carries. Week 2, he had 11 carries. Week 3, he had 15 carries. It's almost like they figured out they need to give him the ball to stay in the game. He's also been targeted 12 times this season in the passing game. 3 catches week 1, 3 catches week 2, 6 catches week 3. I do believe, and why I'm mentioning this is I think his workload is just going to keep increasing. They trust the guy for obvious reasons. He's a straight stud. I believe he's going to go over 52.5 yards a night. It's pretty easy for me. I think his workload is just going to keep getting more and more steady.
It has to. If they want any sort of chance, he's the most reliable option on that offense outside of probably Marvin Jones at the receiver position.
Yeah. And they got to control the clock.
And they also have to stay away from Trevor Lawrence.
I know.
Not that he's bad or anything. It's just they're giving him they're putting all the pressure on Trevor Lawrence when they realistically have people like James Robinson who can handle the pressure. We saw that last year. He was on the same bad team last year, and he was fine. And then you got Marvin Jones. He's a veteran. But if you're making Trevor Lawrence pass the ball 40, 50 times a game, it just isn't going to work. But if you're giving him 25 passes a game, then it's more efficient.
Yeah, agreed. 100%.
Let's move on to the next RB. It's going to be from the other team. It's both of our stars of the night. Joe Mixon, 89.5 rushing yards. Mason, I'll let you start on that one.
Yeah, like I said earlier, like I mentioned in the intro, Joe Mixon is going to go over 89.5 yards tonight. Week 1, he had 29 attempts for 127 yards. Week 2, he had 20 attempts for 69 yards. Week 3, he had 18 attempts for 90 yards. The week 2 stats, you get 20 attempts for 69 yards. That happens. You're not always going to bust it out, but the consistent workload, just like I've said in the previous podcast, this man can be a top 5 running back this year. He has all the opportunity in the world. He's going to get 20-plus attempts tonight. I think if they play smart and they get up on Jacksonville, they're going to need to run the ball 3rd and 4th quarter. So let's look for Joe Mixon to have a huge game tonight. Please start him. Put him in your DFS lineups as well.
Put him in your MVP slot. I think it's
MVP slot. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of guys in this game that have the potential for the MVP. It's just Joe Mixon's matchup is just the most enticing by far. And I think Joe Mixon is going to go over 100 yards in this game. I think he's going to have closer to 110, 120 rushing yards. I mean, last week was the first week he didn't have a very good rush yards per attempt, I feel like. I think he only had I think it was low 4s, which was still solid. But I think throughout the year he's been having high 4s, low 5s. He's been having.
But honestly, that's against that Chicago defense. I kind of expect it, man. They're tough. They're solid. I mean, obviously Chicago's in shambles right now.
Offensively.
Offensively. But their defense is always stout, man.
Yep.
And to kind of go back a little bit, again, the Jaguars defense is allowing 115 rushing yards a game. So it's just kind of easy for me to be like, yep, Joe Mixon's going to beat that 89.5.
Yeah, and also it's interesting because the Bengals' rush defense allowed so far is 78 yards, which is pretty good. That's a very underrated stat that the Cincinnati defense has held people to. I mean, you got to remember they played against Najee Harris, David Montgomery, and Dalvin Cook through 3 games, and they're only allowing 78 rushing yards per game. So
that's solid.
That is very.
That
solid.
is crazy, man. That's crazy.
And then now they're James Robinson. He's good, and I think he can have up to 60, 70, 80 yards around that area. But it's like we said before. I think he's going to go over, but it's just dependent on Urban Meyer. And I feel like, I don't know. It's just, I mean, the Bears' offensive strategy against teams is horrible. Montgomery should have had more yards than what he did against them. And,
he should have.
I mean, Najee Harris, the Steelers' offensive line's kind of in shambles, to be fair.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's another thing. So, but then again, the Jaguars aren't good either. So expect another good night out of Cincinnati's defense. I mean, if you can start them in DFS, I would consider even putting them in there because they could end up with 4 turnovers and maybe even a pick 6 the way they've been playing.
Yep.
Let's move on to our next over-under. We're going to move to the receiver position. It is DJ Chark. He's at an over-under of 48.5 yards receiving. And this one is interesting to me because DJ Chark has not done much this year. He caught 1 ball, I believe, last week for a touchdown. And then week 1 was really his only solid game where he had targets, catches, yards, and a touchdown. Like, that was his only, like, real fantasy performance he's had so far. And I can't trust him until he starts doing it at a more consistent basis. So I'm going to go under here because I think it's going to be a Marvin Jones game.
I like that. Yeah, Stone, you know this well. We're struggling with DJ Chark right now. We have him in the league. He goes out and gets 16 points in week 1, lays a dud with 2 points week 2. Week 3, he comes back with 12 points, and it's like, it's too inconsistent for me right now. His snap count is consistent, 84, 80, 87. His targets in week 1 were 12, but he only had 3 catches. Now, a lot of those are probably uncatchable because Trevor Lawrence is struggling right now. Yards, week 1 he had 86, week 2 he had 19, week 3 he had 49. Their pass defense is allowing 238 yards per game right now. I don't know. I think he's going to be under as well. That's my statement.
Yeah, they're allowing 238 yards, and on top of that, they also are, I think, ranked dead last in terms of points allowed to the receiver position this year, which is kind of surprising but at the same time it's not, because week 1 they played Thean and Jefferson, and obviously they're going to get theirs. But they played the Bears, and obviously their receiving corps didn't do much. I think Allen Robinson had like 30 yards and a touchdown against them. And then last week, I mean, Johnson was doing good before he got hurt. And then, I mean, Juju and Claypool had a bunch of catches, but he only had like 50 yards. So it's like, I'm not really sure how they're number 32 ranked, because I saw that earlier this week, and I didn't believe it for a second, because I thought their defense has been incredible this year thus far. But I guess if they do have a weakness, it is in the air, and Chark's super talented, don't get me wrong, but I'm still going under here. I don't see it. I just don't. Not against Cincinnati's defense. They're going to get pressure on Lawrence, and Lawrence is going to continue to make mistakes.
Very true. I like that take, man. That's simple. It's thorough.
Yep.
All right. We moving on from here?
Yep. Talk about Jamar Chase on the other side of the ball. He's been balling out. Over under 71.5 receiving yards. It seems like he's been doing that every week. He has about 220 yards so far.
He's got about a bomb touchdown every single week.
That's the thing. Is like right now, everyone's on the hype train for Jamar Chase, saying you have to start him at this point. But I'm going to be that guy that says this week not to start him. And I think it's because he's been huge on that boomer bust potential in the receiving game so far. I mean, if he hasn't caught the bump, because it's literally been 3 40-plus yard touchdowns, I believe. If he doesn't catch those in all 3 games, that means fantasy-wise, he's scored you like 9 to 10 points, and that's PPR. Like, that's scary, you know? Like, that's like, so get rid of those touchdowns, and you're like, oh man, Jamar Chase is a big bust, but you give him those touchdowns, and now he's offensive rookie of the month. So it's like, eventually it's going to have to stop, and I think even though Jacksonville's secondary is not good and their defense in general isn't good, and Jacksonville's defense is allowing 302.3 passing yards per game. That is miserably bad. But I am going to stick with my gut here, and I'm going to say Jamar Chase does not get over 71.5 yards. He's under on that, and I think that it's going to be a Tyler Boyd game. I'm calling it now.
I like it. I'm going to have to go with – he's going to go for over. I totally agree. These touchdowns, these long bomb touchdowns are going to come back to Jamar Chase users in the behind. But T. Higgins is struggling with an injury right now. I think that's going to limit him. I think Jamar Chase is only getting more and more on track with Joe Burrow. You can see their connection. He kind of just points at him. Like, all right, go long. Jamar Chase, boom, big touchdown. I do believe he will have the chance to have 5 to 10 targets today. No, it's a big range, but if he gets, 5 catches, I bet he's going over 70 yards. Week 1, he had 101 yards. Week 2, 54. Week 3, 65. We don't know what we're going to get, but I'm going to say over 71.5 today.
You know what scares me about Jamar Chase is he really hasn't been a target monster. Like, even so, Higgins didn't play last week, and he still really wasn't a target monster in that game, which is kind of like surprising. But then again,
Tyler Boyd showed up.
Well, that's the thing is Tyler Boyd needs to be more involved in the offense regardless, because he's been their guy for a few years now, and like he's that security blanket. He's that guy you can trust in the offense right now. Higgins and Chase, they're both young studs, but at the same time, you can't forget about Tyler Boyd. And we saw last week what Tyler Boyd did and I think he only had 5 targets still, and he still ended up with like 4 catches, 30 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, Tyler Boyd he's such a solid receiver that they're forgetting about over there, I feel like. And I think
when I was going through the wide receiving things, they did not have Tyler Boyd which confused me, but whatever.
No, I think Tyler Boyd, this is like his game to like pop off because, I mean, he did solid against the Steelers defense, and then he did pretty solid against the Bears defense. I believe he did good against them, and he did good against Minnesota. That's when he had a lot of targets, actually. It was in that game. But I think against Jacksonville, he's going to get a lot of targets, and he's going to get a lot of catches and a lot of yards. I think if you're trying to start Boyd in DFS, I think it might be a safe play here. I think he might actually go out and get you like 7-8 catches tonight for like 80 yards. And when you're talking single game DFS, like getting around 14 points is like all you want out of a player, because that means you started the correct person. You just need to make sure you get that MVP right, and like we've been saying, it's Joe Mixon.
Yeah. No, I love Tyler Boyd. Super slept on this year. Most fantasy drafts, the kid went later than T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. He's going to start filling in over the season. Tyler Boyd's going to be startable every week, probably going to finish as a wide receiver too, so keep that on your minds. Maybe trade for him. See if you can buy low right now. People still won't be super high on the guy. But yeah, that's my take on it.
You could probably make a package that involves like Christian Kirk and maybe like a Jamal Williams, and you can get somebody like Tyler Boyd. You might not even need to
I might even
much.
send Jamal straight up.
Yeah,
I might send Jamal Williams straight up.
And I would say, this is like completely off topic, but if you have Jamal Williams, I'm afraid of him right now because the head coach Campbell over in Detroit, he said that Swift is getting more touches because he is a beast. And I'm just like, okay. I mean, Jamal Williams is good, but if they're saying it's the DeAndre Swift show over there, I'm not going to intervene with that at all.
Dude, Swift is killing it every week. I'm loving Swift right now.
Yes, he is.
But yeah, we can stay on track here.
I liked him. I just avoided him in all the leagues, so I wasn't sure what he was going to do with Detroit. And
that's completely fair. All right.
Yeah, get back on track, like you said. On to the QBs of Cincinnati and Jacksonville. This is the big storyline for every news outlet out there. The number 1 picks of the last 2 seasons showing off what they got. And I was listening to some ESPN this morning, and people were talking. It was Stephen A. Smith, obviously a very big name. Everyone knows him. I like Stephen A.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He was talking. He said that he believes Trevor Lawrence is going to have the better career of the two. And
interesting.
I am going to disagree with that. I am going to say Joe Burrow has a better career, and talent-wise, they're pretty similar. Like, they have very similar skill sets, and like you see, Joe Burrow still makes these mistakes where he like makes a bad read and throws it to the wrong place. He still does it. He's a young quarterback, and Trevor Lawrence, he's playing under Urban Meyer. He doesn't even have a chance for success right now. So we just got to give him time also. But what really separates the two for me is Joe Burrow's overall ability to lead a team. He is just a natural born leader. Like, that man owns that locker room. Like, everybody respects him. Like, it's just like the way he plays, man. Like, I don't know. It's just something different about
the way Joey B plays.
Yeah,
he's different. He's built different, baby. Come on.
He's one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league right now, easily. And
I do love him.
He's been here for 2 years now. I loved him in LSU, though. To be fair, I'm a Kentucky fan, SEC, and I still love Joey B.
Heck yeah.
But wait, you go ahead.
No, his over/under 248.5 yards. Now we talked about this previously. Jaguars are allowing 302 yards passing per game. So I'm going to say Joe Burrow goes over 248.5. Might not be a lot. I think it might be the Joe Mixon show after that. Week 1, Joe Burrow threw for 261. Week 2, 207. Week 3, 172. So it is varying. His stats, he only has 1 week over 248.5, but I think it's kind of easier to say he will reach that playing the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I think this is a pretty easy one, and another surefire DFS start is going to be Joey Burrow. I mean, he's only averaging around 220 yards per game, I believe you said before the podcast, right?
Well, when you look into passing, when you look at strictly from his passing yards, he's averaging 213 passing yards per game.
Okay. But that's, again, against the Steelers. That's against the Bears. And Minnesota's defense isn't that good. And that's where he got his most yards. He had like 280 in that game. So now you're looking at Jacksonville, another bad defense, definitely worse than Minnesota's defense in my opinion. Yep. Even though Minnesota's in a shootout every single week. But Jacksonville, that's 302 passing yards allowed. That's just not good. They can't get pressure on any quarterback, and it's leaving their secondary out to dry. They don't have any linebackers. Like, their defense is just in shambles. They literally just traded away their cornerback that they drafted this year, I believe. Or was it last year?
I didn't even know they traded him.
Yeah, they traded him.
Do you know what it was for?
Nothing really. I believe it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was out of the blue too. Like, everybody was freaking out about it because they're like, dude, Jacksonville, you get like one guy that's pretty solid on your team and you get rid of him? I don't get it. So their secondary is in even more shambles now after that trade.
Let's go, Joey.
But don't worry, they got Dan Arnold. They traded for Dan Arnold.
Oh, so, I saw that.
Yeah, so Arnold, don't start Dan Arnold. Do not start Dan Arnold anywhere because he's not going to play much in this game. That's another DFS
trade for Dan Arnold. Do you remember, I think it was last year's Stone? We were hyping. I know I was hyping Dan Arnold up. I was like, man, Dan Arnold be the man. Then Dan Arnold, get out of my life.
It's not even because he was supposed to be like a great tight end. He was playing in Arizona. And Arizona had Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray's that mobile quarterback that can find the tight end. So, like, it was just like it's kind of like you were just kind of reading the scheme of, like, a young offensive coordinator, like, trying to get a tight end involved, and they just didn't do it with them for some reason. But don't start Dan Arnold in this game. Just don't do it. But like we were saying, Joe Burrow, over 248.5 yards. I think that's very safe to say with Jacksonville's absolutely fried defense right now. There's just no doubt about it. Like, if you're doing DFS, it's a 3-person stack on Cincinnati players at least. Like, you got to go more Cincinnati than Jacksonville. So now talk about this year's first pick. Trevor Lawrence, 243.5 yards, very similar to what Joe Burrow's is. What do you think about this one?
Well, the Bengals pass defense is allowing 238 yards a game. Said that earlier. So to say that Trevor Lawrence will go over 243.5, I don't think it'll happen. Week 1, he had 332 yards, but he also had 51 attempts. That was against Houston. Week 2 was against Denver. He had 118 passing yards against a good passing defense. And then week 3 came back versus Arizona, mediocre, 219 passing yards. I don't think he reaches it today. I think the Bengals pass defense is good. They're sneaky. I think they're going to create a lot of pressure. I think they're going to give him a lot of trouble. They need to lean on James Robinson tonight versus the Cincinnati Bengals.
I was going to say, this is really like, everything Jacksonville-wise is really dependent on what Urban Meyer does. He's a wild card in terms of what he's going to play call. The first game he comes out and throws the ball 50 times, and then the next game he comes out and throws it 30 times. And then last week he came out and he decides, I'm going to go ahead and throw the ball early, and then once we get down by like 14, we're gonna start getting James Robinson involved. And I'm just like, dude,
that sounds right.
I'm not coaching a team or anything, but I think I could do a little better than that. But really, it just depends on his game plan. And I think against Cincinnati, they're gonna have to pass the ball a little more. I think Cincinnati's just, I don't know, it's tough. It could be a low-scoring game, it could be a high-scoring game, it could be either, to be honest. I think. I'm gonna say, personally, I think he goes over. I think they get down early, and then he gets forced into that throwing role again. So I think he's going to throw over 40 times. And if he does throw over 40 times, I think he's going to hit the mark of 244 yards. I think he will go over because I think Cincinnati's going to take off. Joe Mixon's just going to bring him down the field 2 straight possessions, and I think it's just going to be game from there.
I like it. We've got some differing takes today. Not too shabby. Gives us a perspective of both sides of why you should or should not go with the over-unders.
Yep. And now we can just talk about who we think is going to win the game. We've kind of gone over this pretty much throughout the whole thing. We've definitely subtly hinted at who's going to win this. We don't have Paul here. So if any of you have been listening to this, I am 3-0 Thursday night. Mason is 2-1, and Paul is also 3-0. Paul didn't give us his vote, so he's just going to have to vote with the crowd here. I don't think anybody in their right mind would take Jacksonville, to be honest with you. I am going to say that Cincinnati wins this game 27-13. I'm guessing like the same scores like almost every single week, to be honest. Like I'm pretty sure that was my exact guess last week as well. I'm getting the team.
That's okay.
I'm getting the games right, the teams who win. So that's all that matters at the end.
Jacksonville came out last week and they shocked me. They played with the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if the Cardinals just kind of let their foot off the gas just because they were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. Maybe playing it broadly. Maybe they're looking ahead in the future.
You know what they did?
Don't know.
You know what they did? They didn't throw the ball to DeAndre Hopkins all game, so they got no
Hey,
offense.
what did I tell you in the previous podcast? DeAndre Hopkins was going to be a decoy because of the injury. I don't think he was really able to be thrown out that much because he was hurting pretty good. That's just my take.
Just shows you how much he matters to that offense, though.
He does, big time. If you can't get DeAndre Hopkins going, well, Kyler Murray's going to have only 15 fantasy points. Whatever. No, but I think the Bengals are going to end up winning. I think they're just a better overall team. Joe Burrow has a good game. Joe Mixon will have a good game. Tyler Boyd will have a good game. That defense is tough. So, yeah, Bengals are going to win. I'm going to say 21-14. Okay. I also want to take a second to talk about, if you guys can, start the Bengals defense this week.
Yes.
Start the Bengals defense. They will pick off Trevor Lawrence, okay? So they're going to have that option. They can cause some fumbles. They're going to get sacks, okay? They're going to get at Trevor Lawrence. They're going to cause that pressure. He's going to make bad decisions. And the Bengals defense, like we've been talking about, they're just good. They're not talked about right now. They're a good defense.
If you're struggling with defenses right now, like me and Mason are, because we were very high on Washington's defense, and it turns out they're the 26th ranked defense in the NFL right now. Awful. Go to the waivers, because nobody is high on Cincinnati's defense right now. They don't have a very tough schedule right now. Like, they have a very easy string of games coming up. So it's definitely a good plug and play for a few weeks here. And I think they can keep this momentum going. Maybe stash them for the end of the year when they play against Pittsburgh again. Who knows?
Yeah.
But they are.
They are. I was able to pick up Cincinnati in most of my leagues this week. Just off of waivers. I bet you guys, if you go check, they might still be there. So if they are there right now, dash them or try to start them against Jacksonville tonight. Just last-minute play. Put it against your lineup, against your opposing team.
There's a fantasy league that I am in where they are the number 8 ranked defense right now. So if that doesn't tell you they're doing good, I don't know what does. They've been holding teams to low yardage. They've been getting a lot of interceptions. They've been getting a lot of sacks. They are doing very good. They're just not allowing yards. They're not allowing yards. The other teams aren't scoring on them. Like, they held Minnesota's pretty high-powered offense to 20 points. Like, that's good. Like, that's pretty solid out of them. Nobody expected this. I thought maybe their defense would improve with Trey Hendrickson. I didn't imagine it to improve this much.
I think another guy to talk about, Logan Wilson. The dude's fiery.
Yes.
He makes some mistakes, but the dude, if you guys play with individual defensive players, grab Logan Wilson. The dude scored like over 15 points last week, and he's consistently getting that each week. Not 15, but like 10 and 11. It's like,
to be
get
fair,
that guy.
he had those 2 interceptions last week, which kind of boosted his stats.
Bumped him up, but yeah.
I want one more thing to talk about before we head out of this podcast today.
I
want to talk about, so we've been talking subtly about DFS this whole time, and if you're doing a 5-person draft of a DFS with an MVP, I want to give you guys our opinions on who we think you should be putting in. Both of us have pretty much said Joe Mixon as your MVP. So, who would you want to go with as the next person that we put on that team?
This would be, I have to say Joe Burrow, just because the Jaguars' passing defense is crap. So I think Joe Burrow is an easy one. But a sneaky one might be Tyler Boyd.
Yep. So if you're doing DFS, lock Joe Mixon at that MVP. Possibly Burrow. They're interchangeable because they could both have big games. I'm going to say as a third person that you want to throw in there. I already set some DFS for tonight. And one of my guys that I got in a decent amount of them is Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones isn't very expensive, and he's going to do well.
Yeah.
And that would leave us with 2 more spots with a decent amount of money. If you put Tyler Boyd in there, he's fairly cheap as well. So Now you're looking at a middle of the line player. I would say I don't know how he's gonna do, but Laviska Shenault's an interesting one tonight.
Ooh,
He hasn't done anything all year. He's averaging 5 fantasy points per game and half-point PPR, I believe. It's just he hasn't been very involved in the offense. He had a decent amount of targets week 1, and after that, it's just fallen apart. He had like 3-4 targets last week, I think. Look out for Laviska Shenault actually having a pretty solid game tonight. I think he could be a guy you plug in your DFS.
I love that dude's talent. He's built like a running back. The dude's a beast. Urban Meyer's underutilizing the heck out of that guy. I mean, the connection that him and Lawrence could create could be for the next 5-10 years, you know? So I believe when that dude catches on, he will catch on. And I know Marvin Jones is probably a solid pick for tonight. He could end up having a touchdown or two, maybe over 100 yards. I don't know. But the Bengals might look to shut him down. And if the Bengals shut down Marvin Jones, then I bet someone's going to be running around wide open. Possibly Laviska Shenault. I mean, they're probably going to shut down DJ Chark too. So maybe Laviska Shenault.
Not going to be Chark. They're going to be too keyed in on him. Like he's like as good as Marvin Jones has been. Like DJ Chark's clearly the number 1 receiver on that team. He's the best receiver. I don't think there's really any arguing that. So
yeah,
I personally think DJ Chark's not going to get it done tonight, and I think Marvin Jones and Shenault, if you're starting 2 Jaguars players, it's between those 2 and James Robinson. I think James Robinson would be somebody that I put in my lineups. I believe I had him in some as well.
I like it.
So that's going to conclude everything that we talked about today. Next podcast, we will be doing a Sunday review. We'll be posting that on Saturday. If you guys are listening to this on YouTube, again, please drop a like and subscribe. It means a lot to us. We're just trying to grow this podcast a little more, trying to get the best quality content that we can out for you guys. If you're listening to this on Spotify, go ahead and check out our YouTube. We have other little fantasy tidbits and stuff like that we don't post from the podcast at all. Exclusive content over there. And then also, if you guys really enjoyed the stuff, go ahead and check out our social medias on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're the Fantasy Few on all those platforms as well. Mason, do you want to get us out of here?
Fantasy Few out, baby. Let's go.